All right, I'll say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Tev Shvat. Shvat, Habalina Latova, Mel and Karen Ram, in honor of their parents, Stanley and Cynthia Ringo, and Margareta Ram, for their unwavering love and support. Incredible. Emir Hashem Halavai. Parents, the grandparents should be gebenched with Arichos Yomi V'Shanim, Menachos from the tremendous Mishpacha, and Halavai B'Soros Tovos, all of Klal Yisrael. So with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem, a really great daf ahead of us. Today's daf is Yud Zayin, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on 17, and we are picking up on Tes Zayin Amud Beis 16b. I believe we left off with Tashma? Yeah? Perfect. Tashma, excellent. So Tashma, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 lines up from the bottom. So Tashma, suppose this, remember again, we still have our overarching machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chacham in the Mishnah about whether or not you could create pigel with a partial matir. That's our overarching machlokes, and again a number of sub machlokes kind of embedded in there in the middle. So Tashma, when is this so? B'kmitza over maton kli or b'hiluch. So the Gemara says, when is this so? When you have a machshavas pigel, either by the kmitza, the placement of the kmitza in a kli sharis, hiluch means taking holacha, taking it to the mizbeach. Because you also remember again the question that the Gemara brought up towards the end of yesterday's shir is, what is the impact of having a machshavas pigel during holacha? So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, my love hiloch dahaktara. Are we not talking about the case where you're taking the komets, you're taking it to the mizbeach for the sake of burning it, what we call holacha? And you see from here that a machshavas pigel by holacha can affect pigel. The Gemara says, "Lo hiluch dematan kli." No, it's talking about taking the komets over to the kli sharis itself. Ihachi b'matan kli ubehiluch ubematan kli mibayle. If that's the case, the order is wrong. It shouldn't say placement in the kli and taking it. Rather, it should say taking it and placing it in the kli. The Gemara says, "Halo kasha taniachi." Not a problem. Just change the wording. No problem. Change the wording. So the Gemara, that was easy. So the Gemara says, "Balo lahaktara, balo lahaloch mibayle." But if that's the case, it shouldn't say you were coming to burn it. Rather, it should say ultimately again you were coming to take it. Ha lo kashya. That's not a question either. Kevin the holacha tzarech haktara hi karile haktara. Since ultimately bringing the komets is for the purpose of burning it, it calls it burning it. Ella nasan as hakomets b'shtika. But if that's the case, when it says placement of the komets in silence, it should really say you're taking it. To which the Gemara says kasha. Okay, that's still a question about how to read that brayso. Okay, excellent. Both say another case. A very interesting case here. Hiktir shumshum le'echol. Hiktir shumshum le'echol shumshum ad shekala komets kulo. All right, so this is a very interesting case here. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here. Where is the Rashi? Where is it? Thank you. Second wide line, end of the line. Hiktir kadei shumshum. Kashir shumshum. So we'll say shumshum literally means a sesame seed. So in this case over here, what you're doing is you're taking the kmitza and you're burning it a tiny bit at a time. Literally, again, like okay, so it doesn't literally have to mean a sesame seed's worth. But what it means is you're burning it very little at a time. And what happens? So we'll say, so again, typically when you go ahead and you have a machshavas pigel, you're taking the komets, you're putting it on the mizbeach all at once. What happens if you put the komets on the mizbeach a very little bit at a time? But again, throughout each little bit, you have in mind pigel, right? Chutz lizmano. What does that do? Is that called pigel or not? So the Gemara says, Rav Chisda, machlokes, Rav Chisda, Rav Hamnuna, but Rav Sheish says three-way machlokes. Listen to this. Chad Amar Pasal. One says it's Pasal. Again, I will say, what does Pasal mean? Pasal means the carbon is invalid and ineffective, but not pigel. The Chad Amar Kasher. One says the carbon is kasher. So the Gemara says, sorry, I skipped. Chad Amar pigel. One says it's pigel. Chad Amar Pasal. Chad Amar Kasher. This is one of these great machloksim in halacha, right? Great machloksim in halacha. That no matter what you do, right? No matter what you do, ultimately, again, someone says, Like you're like, I'm like most of Yiddishkeit is like that, right? But again, no matter what you do, someone says one opinion one way. So three-way machlokes. Is it pigel, is it pasal, or is it kosher? So the Gemara says, Lema, man dama pigel krab meir, man dama pasal krab anon. It must be that the opinion that holds that it's pigel is like Rab Meir, because Rab Meir holds that you could create pigel with a partial matir, and the one who holds that it's pasal is like the Rabbanon. Man dama kosher karabi, and the one who holds that it's kosher is like Rabbi. The Gemara says, not necessarily, mimai. Dilma ad kamo kam Rabbi Meir hasam. So maybe Rabbi Meir holds that you can make pigel with a partial matir. Elo dechoshev b'shiuro, because there's still a requisite shear. In other words, remember again, Rabbi Meir was like, if you could go ahead and affect pigel just with the kometz, but not with the lavona, but the kometz is completely intact. But maybe he wouldn't hold that way if you're only burning a little bit of the matir at a time. Aval hacha telo choshev b'shiuro lo. But in this case over here, where there's not a shear, because you're only burning a little bit of the kamitz at a time, maybe not. Furthermore, again, up until now, right, in the previous case in the Mishnah, the Rabbanan said didn't become pigel. Why? Because you only have machshavas pigel by part of the kometz, not the lavona. But in this case over here, as much as you're offering up the kometz a little time, but nevertheless, what? You're still going ahead and you're still offering up the kometz in its entirety, just a little bit at a time. So maybe the Rabbana would agree that become pigel. That kamo ka'amar Rabbi hasam eladullah hadr me'osa avoda. Furthermore, again, ultimately, again, Rabbi himself in the previous, Rabbi in general held that it was kosher. Why? Because you did not fulfill the requisite shear from the avodah. But in this case over here, ultimately, again, the shear does combine. Granted, you're doing it a little bit at a time, but you do have the requisite shear at the end of the day. To which the Gemara says, Ella, man damar pigel divrei hakol, man damar pasal divrei hakol, man damar kasher divrei hakol. Rather, it is a three machlokes, but that three machlokes dictates each one holds that their opinion is definitive. So the one that says that it's pigel feels everyone agrees that it's pigel. The one who says that it's pasal says everyone says it's pasal, and the one who says that it's kasher says everyone says that it is kasher. To which the Gemara says. I'm sorry, the mandar, good. Mandar pigel, divrei hakol. So the one who says that it's pigel holds that everyone holds that it's pigel. The Gemara says kasavar derech achila bekach v'derech haktara bekach, because he holds that this is a normal derech of eating and a normal derech of burning. And therefore, halacha l'maisa again, it's pigel. Mandar pasal, the one who says that it's pasal. Divrei hakol kasavar derech achila bekach ve'in derech haktara bekach. He'll say again, it's the normal manner of consumption, but it's not the normal manner of burning. So because it's not the normal manner of burning, it can't create pigel, but it will become a puzzle. And it's like the mincha, ultimately again, where part of the matir wasn't burned. And the one who says ultimately again that it's kosher will ultimately say that it's derech haktara, but not derech achila. Okay, so we'll say, so therefore three machlokes, ultimately again, what happens if halacha l'maisa, you offer it up shum, which again, we'll get to that in just a while. I'll just tell you, the Rambam Paskin is like the middle opinion that it's possible. That is possible. So if you offered up the carbon, the Rambam said, Hikter kidei shum min hakometz malavona, v'machashiv shiochal kidei shum min hashirayim lemachar. So again, you're going ahead, you're offering it up a little bit at a time, and you have in mind that you're going to eat a little bit as well outside of the permitted time as well. The Rambam Paskins, so again, in this case, at the end of the day, you arrive at the full kometz and lavona. You end up offering the entire amount, but you do it over this staggered amount of time. The Rambam writes, Hare ze psula ve'eno pigel. It's pasal, but it's not pigel. Good. That's how the Rambam Paskins. Good. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Amri Charifi, top of Yud Zayin, 17a. Amri Charifi de Pumpadisa. So again, the sharp ones, the big time de Chama Pumpadisa. Who was that? Rashi says over here, Mefarish Parakam the Sanhedrin, Aifa va'avimi b'nei Rachba de Pumpadisa. The sons of Rachba and Pumpadisa said the following. They said as follows: Charifi de Pumpadisa, Haktara mifageles haktara. So says, listen to this. Literally again, one burning could affect pigel in another burning. What does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Second half from the top. Haktara mifageles haktara. Hiktir komet amanas lahaktir lavona la'achar zman. Pigel. Supposed to listen to this. If at the time that I'm burning the komets, now again, I'm supposed to remember, komets always refers to the flour. If at the time that I'm burning the flour, I have in mind to burn the lavona outside of the permitted time. So you see what's happening over here? I'm having a machshavas pigel, right, about the second matir as I'm offering up the first. Because remember, in mincha has two matirin, the komets and the lavona. So at the time that I'm offering up the komets, I have in mind to go ahead and offer up the lavona outside of the permitted time. Now watch this. Finish Rashi. I both say, now this would seem to be an open and shut case. We already established that one matir can't make another matir pigel. Perhaps this case is different. Why? Because I will say, because at the end of the day, both komets and lavona lived in the same kli. Again, I will say, we're going to get to this. We have to get kind of into the actual like kishkas of a karba mincha, like how it all works, where everything is placed. But suffice it to say, for our purposes, you take the flour, you place it in a kli sharis. The lavona is placed in the kli sharis on top of the flour as well. At the time of the kmitza, the lavona is pushed to the side. Because remember, again, you can't have lavona in the kmitza. What happens if you have a lavona in the kmitza? The kmitza is invalid. Right, it's chaser because again it's considered to be deficient. So everything is living in the same kli. So what the Gemara suggested, what the Charifei the Pompadisa, the sharpers Pompadisa are suggesting is that although normally one matir can't make a second matir pigel, perhaps this case is different. Why? Because they lived in the same kli together. So even according to the Rabbanon who normally said that you cannot create pigel with a partial matir, that's true when the machshavas pigel was about the shirayim. But in this case over here, where you have in mind during one matir to make a second matir pigel, and those two matirin lived in the same kli, perhaps it works. Ulavona b'milsa kaima. Because lavona ultimately again is fully intact. But over here, where your intention was for the lavona, Kima dechashe bebekula matir dami. So Rabbi said, it's actually very interesting. What the Gemara is suggesting over here is as follows. When you're taking the kmitza or doing something with the kmitza, and you have in mind to, let's say, offer up the lavona outside of its permitted time, it could very well be that we view this as having a machshavas pigel with the entire matir. Why? Because interestingly enough, the machshavas pigel includes the entire matir. Because remember, I'm having it during the kmitza, and it's about the lavona. So if you think about it that way, the entire kmitza is the entire matir is involved in the machshavas pigel. Very interesting. Amar Rava, we also learn this. Zaklav, this is the rule. Simply, if you take ultimately the kmitza, you put it in the kli, that's kli shares, v'molech, you take it to the mizbeach, v'hanaktir, and you burn it, le'echol davar shedarko le'echol, u'lahaktir davar shedarko lahaktir, and you have in mind, when doing any of these avodos, that's what? You have in mind regarding something that is normally consumed, or something that is normally burnt, and you have in mind, chutz limkomo, to go ahead and eat it, or burn it outside of its permitted area, Pasal ve'in bal kares. So I'll say that's the chutz limkomo machshava. Chutz lizmano, if you have in mind to burn it or to eat it outside of its permitted time, pigel v'chayavan alav kares. It is pigel and you're chayav kares. My love haktara dumya dahanach. Now, do we not compare the case of burning to these other processes? Ma hanach, just like these other processes, bein le'echol, bein lahaktir. So whether you're eating or whether you're burning, af haktara bein le'echol bein lahaktir. So too, when you're burning it, whether your machshavas pigel is on something you're eating, i.e. the shirayim, or on something you're going to burn, i.e. the lavona, it should work. So you see from here that if you have a machshavas pigel during the komets, that about the lavona, that will actually work. To which where's the low hanach bein le'echol bein lahaktir, haktara le'echol in lahaktir lo. All the other avodos, it's true, you could create pigul, whether your intention is regarding something that you're going to eat, i.e. the shirayim, or you're going to burn. When it comes over to the burning of the komets itself, ultimately, again, the only machshavas pigul is about burning, not about eating. Yosef Rav Menachos bar Agada kamei da Abaye. So Rav Menachos bar Agada was sitting in front of Abaye. V'Yosef v'ka'amar mishmei Rav Chisda, and he said over the name of Rav Chisda, Ein haktara mifugelas haktara. Not true. One act of burning cannot create pigul in another act of burning, which Rabbi say is another way of saying that if at the time of the kamitza, you have in mind, burning of the kamitza, you have in mind to burn the lavona outside of the permitted time, halacha l'maisa, that does not create pigul. That does not create pigul. So you can't create, bless you, you can't create pigul from one act of burning to another act of burning. Even according to Rabbi Meir, who says that normally you can create pigul even in a partial matir. Hanimili heicha dechishev behu b'shirayim. That's when your machshavas pigul was about the shirayim, the leftover parts of the mincha that you're going to eat. I will say first wide line. The komets matir dido. Because I will say, listen to this, in Rabbi Meir's world, you could affect pigul even with a partial matir. Why? Because what does as long as your pigul is about eating the shirayim outside of the permitted time, because that makes sense, because the kamitza allows the consumption of the shirayim. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, if your machshavas pigul in the komets is about the shirayim, even though again it's only a partial matir, that will work. First wide line of al-hacha, the komets lav matir de lavonahu lo matir mefagile. But halacha l'maisa, the kamitza is not the matir of the lavona, and therefore it cannot affect pigul. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye. Ani Mari Mishmei de Rav. Is Rebbe saying this in the name of Rav? Amalei in. He said, yes, I am. Itmar Nami. Amarav Chista Amarav. Ein haktara mifageles haktara. One act of burning cannot create pigul in another act of burning, which is another way of saying that if when burning the kamitza, you have in mind to burn the lavona outside of the permitted time, that will not create pigul. So the Gemara says, Amalei, good, Amrav Yaakov bar Idi, Mishmei da Abaye. So Rav Yaakov bar Idi said in the same way of Abaye, we also learn this, Shachat echa min akvasim, vecha min. So we'll say back to the Shtei Lechem by Shavuos. Remember again, Shavuos, you are offering up 2 sheep. Those are the matirim for the 2 loaves. So the Shtei Lechem. So watch this. If you shechted one of the sheep, and when doing so, you had in mind to eat from it tomorrow. So what's talacha, which is outside of the permitted time? That's called chutz lizmano. Hu pigul v'chavero kasher. That sheep that you had the chutz lizmano machshava, that sheep will be pigul, but its fellow sheep will be kosher. If, however, you had, when shechting sheep A, you had in mind to eat sheep B outside of its permitted time, then what's the halacha? Shneihen ksherim. Both will be kosher. My tama, what's the reason? Lav mishum dechevon the lav matir didehu lo matzi mefagil bei. It must be because that since sheep A is not the matir for sheep B, therefore again sheep A can't create pigul in sheep B. So which is what we're saying. Which is where it says no, that's not the reason. Lo hasam hu de lo ikva bechadmana. Aval hacha de ikva bechadmana ki chadamu. It's not comparable. I'll tell you why. Because we'll say sheep A and sheep B. I understand why one can't affect pigul for the other, because one is not the matir of the other. I understand that. But not only that, they're totally separate entities. But that's not the same discussion as the komets affecting pigul within the lavona. Why not? What's the havamina to say that machshavas pigul in the komets could affect pigul in the lavona? Why? Because they lived in the same kli. So because they lived in the same kli, the havamina is that there's some heightened level of connectedness. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, perhaps, if when burning the kmitza, you have in mind to burn the lavona tomorrow, perhaps that should work for pigul. So we'll say, watch this. I'm Rav Hamnuna. We'll say, get ready for this line. Rav Hamnuna said as follows: Ha milsa ivlali Rabbi Chanina. Listen to this. So Rav Hamnuna said, this ruling, ivla li Rabbi Chanina. So we'll say the lashon over here is very interesting. What is ivla li? Literally again, hat imeni v'lamdeni. Ivla is from lashon of absorption. Right? So this is beautiful. Rav Hamnuna said, this matter, Rabbi Chanina caused to be absorbed into me. So we'll say it's a very profound statement in and of itself on two levels. First of all, Rav Hamnuna's saying is, I will say, you could learn Torah in two different ways. You can learn Torah in that you hear things, very interesting, move on, or you could absorb that which you learn. What's the chiluk? The chiluk is, if Torah just kind of sits on the surface, it doesn't become part of me. If I absorb it, ultimately, again, then it fundamentally becomes part of who and what I am. So we'll say, you'll see, how do you do that? How do you absorb it? But we'll get to that in just a moment. But look how beautiful this is. So Rav Hamnuna said, this matter, this piece of Torah, was absorbed into me by my Rebbe, which obviously also is a reflection on his Rebbe, Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina didn't just teach Torah. Rabbi Chanina allowed Torah to be absorbed into his Talmidim. And I will say, get ready for this. Vitakilali kekule Talmudai. And this ruling, this teaching, is literally, again, my favorite halacha in all of my learning. Wow. What is it? Hiktir komet lahaktir lavona. If a person went ahead and, when he was offering up the komets, ultimately, again, he had in mind to do the lavona chut lizmano tomorrow, or le'echol shirayim lemachor, or to eat shirayim tomorrow, pigel. Ultimately, again, it affects pigel. So we'll say, I just want to point out, this is incredible. This was Rav Hamnuna's favorite piece of Torah in Kala Torah Kula, right? This was it, yes? Like, whenever Rav Hamnuna needed like a go-to Dvar Torah, right? Whenever, right, he wanted something to inspire the masses, the pre-Ne'ilah speech, what did he pull out, right? What did he pull out? He pulled out this halacha that whenever you have a komer, whenever you're going ahead and offering up a kamitza, right, of your karban mincha, right? Ultimately, again, and you have in mind a machshavas pigel to offer up the lavona tomorrow or to eat the shirayim tomorrow. Ultimately, again, it affects pigel. This was his favorite ruling. So Rabbi say, understand the following: these two statements are interdependent, are interconnected. When does Torah get absorbed into you? When you make the piece of Torah your favorite. There's someone I know who always says like that. The way they always approach every day is, today is the best day ever. One second, you had this, you had that. It's a mindset. Today is the best day ever. Whatever it is that happens, it doesn't happen. Today is the best day ever. When you have that mindset, everything fundamentally shifts. So when you learn a piece of Torah, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best piece of Torah I ever learned. Really? What does it mean? I don't know. I don't know what it means, right? How do you apply it to your life? Absolutely no idea. But I can just tell you, this is the best piece of Torah I've ever learned. When you look at Torah like that, it's absorbed into you. Then it becomes part of you. Then suddenly, again, it's not a piece of information that sits on the top of your mind, but rather it's something that permeates into the very crevices of your soul. I think he's really telling me, Rav Hamnuna, this is the nearest and dearest, best piece of Torah that you ever learned. That really, out of all the volumes of Torah that you had, this was the best piece. Yeah, it's the best Torah ever. And when you approach every single line like this is the best Torah ever, then by definition, again, then ultimately, ivlali, it becomes absorbed and part of you. Rabosai, it's such an important way for us to navigate Torah. Learning Torah is not about absorbing information. It's about absorbing the very nectar of meaningful living. Whether you understand it or you don't understand it is profoundly irrelevant. If you allow it to be absorbed into you, it fundamentally changes who and what you are. So, what is it teaching us? So again, if he's teaching me that a machshavas pigel in the komets allows you to affect pigel in the lavona, then just say lema hiktir komets hikla haktir lavona. Just say that. Imifaglin bechatzi matir. If it's about that you could affect pigel in a half a matir, kamash malon lema hiktir komets lechol shirayim lemachar. then just say ultimately, again, just illustrate that in the case of if you had in mind to eat the shirayim tomorrow, then you could tell me that you could create pigel and half a matir. Like Rabbi Meir, itar bayu asa kamashmal. And if it's coming to teach me both of these lessons, lema hiktir komets lahaktir lavona v'lechol shirayim l'machar. Then say it. He offered up the komets in order to go ahead and offer up the lavona outside of the prescribed time and to eat the shirayim tomorrow as well. In reality, Rav Hamnuna holds that ultimately when you offer up the kmitza, you can't make the lavona pigel. Furthermore, again, you also can't create pigel with a half a matir. What's different about this case? The difference of here, Rabosei, and this is very interesting, is that the machshavas pigel permeated the entire mincha. Now, what does that mean? Because in this case, remember, Rabbi say what's happening over here. The idea is when doing the kmitza, ultimately, again, he has in mind to go ahead and offer up the lavona and eat the shirayim tomorrow, which effectively means that now you have machshavas pigel that has hit on all three parts of the mincha, on the kmitza, on the lavona, and on the shirayim. Perhaps when you have such a pervasive machshavas pigel, everyone will agree that pigel devolves upon the carbon itself. Very interesting. So again, it was taught before Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abba, hiktir komets lechol shirayim, if you went ahead and you offered up the komets in order to eat the shirayim outside of the permitted time. What's the halacha? The divrei akol pigel. Everyone agrees that it's pigel. The Gemara says, really? The Gemara says, vaha miflag pligi. That's not true. That's the machlokes Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanan Mishnah. Because again, you're having a machshavas pigel with a chatzi matir. So you have in mind during the kmitza, but you didn't have in mind with the lavona. Isn't that the machlokes? Ela ema l'divrei akol pasel. Everyone will agree that the carbon is at least possible. Even the Rabbanan who say that you cannot create a pigel with a chatzi matir will agree that the carbon itself is possible. V'leima harezeh pigel of Rabbi Meir. Why not just say it's pigel and it's Rabbi Meir? Tana divrei akol asnuya. So ultimately, again, here's the problem, because the Tana said according to everyone, it's possible. To which the Gemara says, according to everyone, it's pigel. So now the Gemara says like this: pigel bepasel michlafle. So it's easy to say that maybe the Tana got mixed up between the word pigel and pasel, or that just got changed. I think Gemara says to say that everyone agrees that's not a scribal error. You know, pigel to pasel or pasel to pigel, that could be ascribed to scribal error. Divrei hakol cannot be ascribed to scribal errors. So that machlok is still applies. So both say, incredible. So bottom line, halacha l'maisa, how do we paskin, right? Because everything that we've seen is really a derivative, ultimately, again, of this machlokes, Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanan. Can you affect pigel with a chatzi matir or not? Which Rabbi say. So again, to frame this just for a moment. So to frame this, what does this mean? A carbon mincha, remember again, has how many matirim? How many matirim? 2. What are they? Number 1, the burning of the komets. Number 2, the burning of the lavona. The question is, if you have in mind a machshavas pigel during one of those 2 things, can that create pigel? That's the shaila. Rabbi Meir says yes. The Rabbanan say no. According to the Rabbanan, in order to have pigel, you need to have machshavas pigel during both of the matirim, not just one. How do we paskin? Get ready for it. I know you've been waiting for days for this. This is Hilchos Psuli HaMukdashin, Halacha Tes Zayin, Parak Tes Zayin, Halacha Zayin. Here it is. Chishev machshavas zman, b'shas kmitza, v'alo b'shas likot halavona. Oh, shechishe machshavas zman b'shas likot halavona v'lo b'shas kmitza hareidzu pstula ve'ena pegel ad sheyechashev machshavas hazman b'chol hamatir shehu hakometz halavona. So we'll say halacha l'maisa. The Rambam Paskin is like the Rabbanan. In order for there to be a machshavas pigel, the machshavas pigel must take place over the course of both matirim. Now again, I will say. Now what I want to point out is as follows. It doesn't remember the way machshavas pigel takes place or occurs is you don't have to have a sustained pigel machshava throughout the entirety of the avoda. You just need it at some pivotal time. Like for example, at the time of the kmitza and the moving over of the lavona, at the time of the burning of the kmitza and the lavona, at the time of the holacha of the Kmitza and the Lavona. As long as it's during a pivotal time, you could affect Pigel. However, the Machshavas Pigel must take place with both matirim. So halacha l'maisa, the Rambam paskins like the Rabbanon, and ultimately again not like Rabbi Meir, not like Rabbi Meir. And Abba say you're feeling about that halacha, you're feeling about that Rambam. What's your feeling about it? Best Rambam ever. Best Rambam. Abba say just keep saying it. Best Rambam ever. Best perek of Shas ever. Best halacha ever. And if you do that in Mir Hashem, then this beautiful Torah, then this beautiful Ruchnius, then all this beautiful Kedusha will be absorbed into your very neshama. Hadrun Allah, hakometz es ha-mincha. We'll say, Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov. Hakometz, weiter. Hakometz es ha-mincha. Lecho davar shein darko lecho. Ulahakter davar shein darko lahakter. Kosher. So you've actually seen this many times already. If you go ahead and you do the Kmitza and the Mincha, right? And you have a Machshavas Pigel. We're still with Pigel. You have Machshavas Pigel, right? And you have in mind to eat something that's not normally consumed or to burn something that's not normally burned. Kosher. So we'll say, so again, remember, Tanakama holds, the Rabbanon hold, that Allah Chalamaisa, the only time Pigel works is, remember, Pigel is a Machshava Chutz Lizmano, to do something outside of the permitted time. The doing something has to be either to eat something that is normally eaten or to burn something that's normally burned. So just to take this theological extension. Therefore, for example, let's say again, I'm the Kohen, I'm offering up the Kmitza on the Mizbeach. I'm burning it, right? And I have in mind to eat the Lavona tomorrow. That's not Pigel, right? That's not Pigel, right? Why is it not Pigel? Because the Lavona is something that is burned and not something ultimately, again, that is consumed. So therefore, again, in order to affect Pigel, your mindset has to be about something that is normally eaten or something that is normally burned. Rabbi Elazar posel. Rabbi Elazar says, you're right, it's not Pigel, but it will become posel. Lechol davar shedarko lechol, ulahaktir davar shedarko lahaktir, pachos mikizayis. Similarly, Machshavas Pigel only works if you have in mind to eat something or to burn something in the shir of a kizayis. But let's say you had in mind to eat something or to burn something less than a kizayis, kosher. There's no Pigel, and the carbon is totally, fundamentally kosher. Lechol kechatzi zayis lahaktir kechatzi zayis kosher shein achila v'aktar mitzarfin. Furthermore, let's say at the time of the burning of the kmitz or the sprinkling of the blood, whatever the matir is, you have in mind to eat a half a kizayis of something and to burn a half a kizayis of something. I say, great, it combines to form a kizayis. It does not combine to form a kizayis. Yes, in order for it to be Pigel, either has to be a kizayis of consumption or a kizayis of burning, but half of each will not combine. Incredible. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, my time is Rabbi Elazar. So we'll say, so let's go back for a second. So Rabbi Elazar argues in the first case, right? Now, here's what's interesting. So we'll say, better even to illustrate this, let's say in an animal carbon, right? In a regular animal carbon, animal sacrifice, what's the matir? Zrika. So let's say at the time of Zrika, you have in mind to eat the sacrificial parts tomorrow. Now remember, sacrificial parts when they are burned to the Mizbeach. You have in mind to eat sacrificial parts. So again, the Tanakama holds the carbon is fine. Carbon is fine because it's not Pigel to have in mind to eat something that's normally burned. Rabbi Elazar says it is Pigel. Someone says, what's Rabbi Elazar's logic? Amar Kra. So the pasuk says, Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, my time with Rabbi Elazar. What is Rabbi Elazar's logic? Amar Kra, because the pasuk says, V'im he'achol ye'achel mibasar zevach shlamav. So the Gemara said, B'shtei achilas chasam medara. Torah is talking about two different manners of consumption. Achar achilas adam ve'achar achilas mizbeach. One is talking about consumption of a person eats, and one is talking about consumption of the mizbeach. Right? Rabbi say consumption of the mizbeach means things that you burn on the mizbeach. To teach us the following lesson: in the same way, ultimately, again, that you could have a machshavas pigel regarding something that is consumed by a person, you could also have machshavas pigel by something consumed by the mizbeach. Ukeshem shemechashem me'achilas adam la'achilas adam, u'me'achilas mizbeach la'achilas mizbeach. In the same way, again, that you can have in mind regarding something that is consumed by a person, and you can have something that is consumed by the mizbeach. Kach mechashvin me'achilas adam le'mizbeach u'me'achilas mizbeach la'adam. Shabbos said, this is his very simple, but Elazar's logic is like this. The pasuk says, Im ha'achol ye'achel. Two manners of consumption. There's human consumption and there's Mizbeach consumption. The fact that the Torah links the two tells me that even if I have in mind to eat something that is normally offered on the Mizbeach, outside of the permitted time, or I have in mind to burn something on the Mizbeach that is normally consumed by people, that creates pigul. That's his logic. That's his logic. To which the my time, what's the reason? Midaf kinhu. Because the Torah itself labels burning on the Mizbeach as an act of consumption. So we'll say that's Rabbi Elazar's logic. I say according to the Rabbanan, ultimately again, why is it that the Torah frames consumption on the Mizbeach like a lashon of achila? 17b, the loshna ki mechashe b'lashon achila lemizbeach. Now, both, and I remember that Rabbanan disagreed. Both say this is a riveting machlokes. So remember again, Rabbi Elazar says like this. He says at the end of the day, whether you have in mind to eat something that is normally consumed or to eat something that goes on the mizbeach, right? It's pigul. It's pigul. Why? Because he understands that the fact that the Torah links these two acts and calls them both achila indicates that lamaisa they're effectively the same. So whether you had in mind to eat something that's normally consumed by people or consumed by the mizbeach outside the permitted time, that creates pigul. What did the Rabbanan do with this? The Rabbanan say, no, I'll tell you what it does. Now the Rabbanan disagree. The Rabbanan say the only time you create pigul is if you have in mind to eat something which is normally consumed or to burn something which is normally burned. But if you have in mind to eat something which is normally put on the mizbeach, or to put on the mizbeach something that's normally consumed, that's not pigul. What do they do about hay achol ye achel? Very simple. Ki mechashev lo shnachil lo mizbeach, v'lo shna ki mechashev lo shnatar lo mizbeach. To teach us, Rabosai, that when you have in mind, let's say, to burn something outside of the permitted time, whether you express that intention in the lashon of burning or of eating, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So even an expression of eating by the mizbeach ultimately again will create pigul. Inam, the other possibility is ma'achila bekizayis afaktara bekizayis. Just as consumption, right, is kizayis, so too burning on the mizbeach, the shear for pigul is kizayis. Uli olam achila de'archa mashma. But ultimately again, Achila, ultimately again, still Rashi says over here, achila de'archa mashma. Achila means normative achila. Ultimately, again, which means that you're burning the comments and refers to shirayim, which are consumed by people. Rabbi Elazar will say, Im kain, lichtov rachmana, im he'achol, inami im yochal. If that's the case, that ultimately, again, the Torah is telling me that you're only chayiv pigul if you have in mind for something that is eaten by people or eaten or consumed in the mizbeach. But you can't interchange the two, then let the Torah use the same word twice. My he'achol ye'achel. Why ultimately, again, is it two different lashonos? Shamas mina tarti, right? It teaches us two things. What does it teach us? Number one, that the shear for both the mizbeach and for a person is the same, which is kizayis. So in general, you're only chayiv for pigul if you have in mind to either consume or burn on the mizbeach a kizayis. But the fact that the Torah uses the same lashon of achila for both human consumption and mizbeach consumption indicates to me what? That they are indeed interchangeable. So whether you have in mind to eat something which is consumed by people or to eat something which is consumed on mizbeach outside of the permitted time, it affects pigul. So Rabbi said Ravasi, v'taimad Rabbi Eliezer mishum hachi. So if that's the case, that this is Rabbi Eliezer's logic, then kares nami l'chayiv. And I will say, if that's the case, let's play this out, right? According to Rabbi Eliezer, so we'll say, let's just walk this through, right? So I'm a Kohen, and I'm offering up the kamisa on the mizbeach. And as I'm offering up the kamisa in the levona, and actually, let's go with the regular carbon, right? I'm doing zrika because we don't have to be married to mincha. I don't have to be married to mincha. So I'm doing zrika of the dam, and when I'm doing that, I have in mind to eat the sacrificial parts tomorrow. Okay, so according to I remember, let's go through this. What's halach? Is it pigul or not? Machlokes. According to the Rabbanan, the answer is no, because you have in mind to eat something that's normally burned in the mizbeach. According to Elazar, yes. Okay, so according to Elazar, if that's the case, if I do indeed end up eating those items, I should have kares. There should be a chiyuv kares, because remember, kares is the punishment for eating pigel. To which the Gemara says, "Hakares nami lechayev, techitema hachanami." So maybe you'll say, yeah. In fact, again, halacha lemaisa, yeah, you would be chayev kares. So here's the problem. Vaha atu de'amrit b'shmei de Rabbi Yochanan, but yet you are the one who said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Mo de Rabbi Lazar she'ein anash kares. Rabbi Lazar says, as much as when you have in mind to eat something which is normally offered up on the mizbeach, as much as we're going to say that it's pigel, you're not chayev kares. Not chayev kares. In other words, so what it sounds like, interestingly enough, what it sounds like over here is that it is a almost like downgraded pigel, right? It's pigel, but it's a diminished pigel without kares. Amrlei Tanahi Ali B'Dir Lazar. In reality, this is a machlokes Tanaim in the opinion of Rabbi Lazar. Some say, interestingly enough, it sounds like over here what's happening is that in Rabbi Lazar, we call it pigel, but really what it might be is puzzle. So it's machlokes. Some say it's puzzle midaraisa, some say it's puzzle d'Rabbanan. Now, where do we see this? So I'll say, watch this. The sign. Here it is. Very interesting. So listen to this. I shech the carbon, and I have in mind to drink of its blood tomorrow. Now you're gonna, why? Why, right? Out of all the things in Yiddishkeit that I have a Yitzhahara for, blood consumption, but we'll say, right? Remember, one man's struggle. You never know. The things that might look easy for me are a struggle for someone else. Things that are a struggle for someone else. Good. Simon says as follows. So what happens? It's an interesting case. So I shech the carbon, and I have in mind to drink the blood tomorrow. Okay. Now we'll say. Now remember again. What is that a case of? Then what do you do with blood normally? What do you do with blood? Zrika or now remember, there's only really a very little bit of blood that gets sprinkled. What do you do with the rest of it? Shirayim, you pour it out on the basis. So here's an example of something that is normally put on the mizbeach, but you're having in mind to go ahead and consume it. Or, for example, lahaktir mibisaro lemachar. Or you take, now bisaro means the part of the meat that you normally eat. So you take the consumable part of the carbon and you have in mind to burn it on the mizbeach tomorrow, or you have in mind to eat the sacrificial parts tomorrow. So I'll say, so this is our case. I have in mind to either eat something that is normally offered up on the mizbeach tomorrow, right? Or I have in mind to offer something up on the mizbeach that is normally consumed. What is the halacha? Rabbi Lazar posel. Ooh, it doesn't say pigel. Rabbi Lazar says it's posel. Puzzle means the carbon is invalid, but that's not pigel. Remember again, in the world of carbonos, you have three levels. There's pigel, puzzle, kosher. Pigel, puzzle, kosher. Right, pebechaf, papak. Right, pigel, puzzle, kosher. Just if you walk away with one thing from Menachos, is papak. Pigel, puzzle, kosher. So I'll say, so remember, so now Rabbi Lazar in the Bryce is saying that it's puzzle. Lahaniach midamo lemachar. However, again, if you have in mind just to leave over blood tomorrow, in other words, we'll say not to sprinkle it, right? Not to go ahead and eat it, literally just to leave it over. So what's talocha? Lahaniach midamo leposel. Rabbi Yehuda posel. Rabbi Yehuda ultimately says that is posel. Rabbi Lazar af bezu. Rabbi Lazar posel chamachshirin. Even in this case, ultimately again, Rabbi Lazar apostles and the Chachamim ultimately say that it's kosher. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda liba deman. Whose opinion does Rabbi Yehuda reflect? Right? When Rabbi Yehuda says ultimately to leave over the blood till tomorrow, that it's possible, whose opinion is that? So if it's going to the Rabbanon, hashta uma hasam the kamachashe b'lashnachila machshi Rabbanon. Even in a case where you expressed your intent in the expression of achila, the Rabbanon say that it's kosher. Hachala kol shekin. All the more so in this case. Ella aliba de Rabbi Lazar. Rather, it must be in accordance to Rabbi Lazar. From Rabbi Lazar, af bizu Rabbi Eliezer posel v'chachmachshirin. And yet Rabbi Lazar said that even in this case, Rabbi Eliezer says that it's posel, and the Chacham say that it's kosher. Rabbi Lazar, hainu Rabbi Yehuda. If that's the case, Rabbi Lazar is saying Rabbi Yehuda, ela lav kares ika beinayu. Rather, Rabbi say it must be that what is the point of contention between them? Liability for kares. To Rabbi Yehuda savar lahaniach psula ba'alma Bahanach kares nami mechayiv. That ultimately, again, Rabbi Yehuda holds like this: that normally just leaving it over will generate a psul. But ultimately, again, in these cases, you'll be chayiv kares. V'asar balazar lameimar idi v'idi pasel ve'ein bo kares. And Rabbi Elazar comes along to say that in both cases, ultimately, again, it's pasel and it's not going to be kares. So both say. Fascinating. So watch. So just very quickly, in literally the 30 seconds we have left. So just watch the evolution of the halakha. So originally we thought the machlokes ultimately between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Eliezer and the Tanakama in the Mishnah was if you have in mind a machshavas pigel to eat something that's normally put on the mizbeach, or to put on the mizbeach something that's normally consumed. Chachamim say it's not pigel. Rabbi Eliezer says it is pigel, and therefore whenever I say pigel, you think kares. Good, thank you. Right? I think kares. Now it turns out that there's machlokes. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer doesn't say pigel, but rather he says pasel. So pasel means obviously the carbon is going to be invalid, but it's not attributable. So it turns out that in fact there's a machlokes tanoim. Does Rabbi Eliezer hold pigel? Does Rabbi Eliezer hold pasel? That's where we're going to end up. I'm leaving you in a state of flux. I apologize. Existential menachos flux, but you're going to be okay. Miras Hashem, tomorrow we'll resolve this. Get some halacha l'maisa. Mazel tov. I'm finishing the parak. Mazel tov. I'm beginning the new parak. Shkoyach. All right, have a great day, everyone. I'm sorry? I know. Big old puzzle.
I sent the message to Rob last night. Everything was good.
Malach Hashem. Malach Hashem. Continue to flow. Yes, Hashem. The Mishnah says posel, right, posel. So the hamamina is that posel means pigel. Kamash Mallah, no, posel means posel, pigel means pigel.